Welcome to The Blueprint, where we seek out individuals that are built to be the best, giving us tips and tools to excel, taking us to the next level of growth.
We've talked in a lot of elements that kind of, I think, are culminating to this, forming habits, the Pomodoro technique we talked about, focusing for 20 minutes and then, being able to take that break and decompress, et cetera, right? So all that kind of comes down to, especially when you're a newer manager and all of a sudden you're filled with a bunch of extra calls. And then for us, especially when some days it feels like it's call after call, how do we effectively manage those calls? How do we get the most out of them? What are some good things and bad things to do to host them yourselves? Lots of questions, I think, come up there. I've been kind of making a list of things. I've been experimenting with some things over the last couple of months and how I've structured meetings, attended meetings, run meetings, really kind of everything organizational meetings, whether that be in person or on phones. But today I wanted to talk specifically about having those virtual meetings, whether it be phone or video. Over the last couple of months, I really think like last 2 months specifically, are there some things that you've noticed different on how I've started conducting or attending meetings?
So I do think you have tended to end on time or early. I've noticed that.
And 100% that's been absolute deliberate. So that's actually related to the Pomodoro technique. One question that was proposed to me in the DR when I was talking to our team there was, well, Pomodoro technique's great for like focusing on tasks, but if you're just on back-to-back calls, like how can we benefit from it? So I probably gave it some thought and I said, well, geez, meetings in promptly at the 30-minute mark, whether they're done or not. So why not end at 25, 26, 27, right? So that's been one thing. So yep, exactly. That's intentional. How often have you guys joined meetings in the last month and you maybe are only like a minute or two late, but the meeting seems to already have been started?
Yes, I've noticed that people jump in prior to the start time.
Yeah. So one thing I've also been doing is, and they kind of go into the same bucket, starting and ending on time, right? It's really coming down to just thinking about what's happening, right? So if I have a meeting with 20 people, right, and the meeting starts, and I say, okay, I'm just going to give everyone a couple minutes here to join, and then 2 minutes goes by. Well, there's 20 people on the phone, so I have now wasted how many minutes of production? I've wasted 20 minutes times by, or 2 minutes times by 20 people, so 40 minutes of productive time was now lost, all because I'm waiting for one person to join, right? So one thing I've made it a point to do is start my meetings promptly on time. And when you do that and someone joins into a meeting and they're only a minute late, but the meeting is already kind of talking, what do you think that does to the kind of the overall environment or atmosphere? How does that make you feel?
Well, I think sometimes you feel like you're joining late when I think I joined right on time. And also, that if you are actually joining late, that, you need to be more prompt if you're going to be engaged from the beginning of the meeting session.
Yeah, and the latter is what I'm really getting at, right? Especially as a new leader coming on, right? If you're late by, you say, oh, I'm only a minute late, and the meeting's already started, you're like, okay, this is how this is going to go. I better make sure I'm on time, right? One way or another. So it's a little bit of accountability, right? The other thing too is for you to start a meeting on time. So let's flip it to you're the host now, right? And I'm going to start my meeting promptly on time. What do you think that does for the host to have to start promptly on time? What can they not do?
They can't get distracted by other tasks, for one.
There you go. And that's the biggest thing. Sometimes I wonder, And look, I'll be honest, I've done it myself, right? I'm trying to wrap up a task, right? And I'm like, oh, thank goodness somebody is not here yet. So, okay, let's start this meeting. We're going to give it a minute or two and let everyone join. And the reality is sometimes I think, and I only think that because I've done it, right? Like, okay, everyone's not there. I'll give everyone a minute to join, and I'm trying to wrap up this task anyways. But the reality is I should be prepared. I should be focused on the meeting at hand and respecting those people's times I've invited for that meeting, not trying to wrap up for the last meeting. But it's all connected, right? If every meeting is going over or ending right on time, it makes that very difficult to transition from one to the next. So it's kind of like a meeting ecosphere where we kind of all have to, try to make sure we're doing the right thing here. We're not running our meetings over. So we're respecting people's times like that, because it's going to hinder their ability to either facilitate their next meeting or be on time for their next meeting, right? So those are some things, and that I think those would probably be noticeable things that you might have noticed in the last month or two. Am I perfect? No, I'm sure we've still had meetings that gone over, right, Marlon? Marlon and I were just on a extended one. But at the same time, I think there's also some other keys that are causing meetings to go over that we can address. So from your guys' experience, what are some things that you think cause meetings to go longer than they're supposed to?
I know on my own end, the meetings, they all have a topic, and I'm not the greatest at sending an agenda ahead of time, but the title of the meeting does kind of give you an idea of what it's about. But because I have the whole team together, I start to, once everything's wrapped up with the actual topic, I'll start, if I have extra time, I'll move into other topics. So for instance, if I'm talking about quality on this call, maybe I'll start going down the rabbit hole of short calls, or maybe it's AHT or something like that, where it wasn't the actual purpose of the call.
Yeah, no, I'm guilty as charged, Brittany. I mean, if I'm on a call and somebody brings something up, sometimes similar to topic shifting, I try to problem solve on the call, and that's not really sometimes the intention of the call. So that definitely could be a blocker, right? One thing you mentioned is sending out agendas, right? So that is a absolute best habit of anything. If you're going to structure a meeting, is to send the agenda. So one thing I think I was really good at, and then I got okay with, and I think I've gotten better, and then I still think I have some area to improve. So all those things in terms of setting agenda. So usually if I send you a meeting, there's typically an agenda inside that meeting, right? So here's where it breaks down. Reoccurring agendas is where I get tripped up. So for example, this meeting we have here today, if you look at the meeting invite, maybe some people haven't even looked at it, and that's kind of another, I would say, pitfall some new managers have, is they don't actually look at the agenda or the calendar invite they were sent. They just accepted it, right? So make sure you're opening the calendar invites, because they likely have agenda or useful information in them, right? So like if you look at this one, the topic has been the topic for ever, right? So while it gives you insight as to a general topic we're going to be discussing on a reoccurring invite, I really should make it a point to go in there and specify what topic this particular session will be discussing. For example, on this call, we discuss habits, and that's a wide array of topics that we discuss, right? So having an agenda that just kind of outlines how we'll be conversating isn't necessarily as effective as if I were to have put specifically today's topic will be discussing meetings and how we run them and the goods and the bads, right? That would have been much more effective. So I really could myself take that to the next level and not just put it kind of like on the automated front of where, okay, it's a reoccurring meeting, here's my agenda, it's always there. So that's like probably the biggest piece that I can improve on there is making sure I'm updating those agendas accordingly. But the other piece of it that you mentioned is like I said, I try to jump in and solve problems. I think some people, they get distracted with new topics that weren't even there. and then they just kind of go off and run. I think Rita sent out, and I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read through it or not. She was doing some research on kind of meetings and best practices. Sent out a great article. Have any of you guys had a chance to read that? I know it was just a little bit ago.
I haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, no problem. So go ahead and give it a read when you can. There's actually 3 key areas inside that article, but I want to share this article with everyone as well, because it not only does it talk about 3 good habits about meetings, right? But it also talks about habits in general and the differences. It just gives kind of another view set from a perspective of habits and how to create them. It talks about cues, it talks about routines, it talks about rewards. I believe those are the 3 topics, right, Rita?
Yeah, and it's a quick read. It's probably like 3 to 5 minutes to review it.
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of cool for me because it not only did talk about habits, which is kind of our bread and butter, our key topics every month, right, that we discuss as a team, but it also talks about the specific topic of calendar invites. One of the first things it talks about in terms of a bad habit is just immediately accepting. So I think that's probably part of the problem sometimes. So maybe you created an agenda and you have a team of leaders that join, new leaders, and they've just accepted it without even reading the agenda. So you could most assuredly, they're going to come to the meeting, you're going to start going over information based on your subject. They've seen the subject line because they accepted it, but they have a different perspective of what that subject is. It's either because you didn't write the agenda or because they didn't read it and they just clicked accept. So it's important to take pause when we are accepting calendar invites. And there's a few reasons to do that. One, to make sure you're prepared, right? If you're not prepared, then what happens is you have a meeting to basically have a pre-meeting, right? I don't know how many times I've been on a call where we get on a call, it's a meeting to really solve something. It is a meeting to solve something, a very specific topic, but it ends up to be a meeting of awareness. We discuss what's the issue or the topic at hand, and then we have to set up a follow-up. When realistically, if people were prepared, we probably could have taken care of that right on the spot. So, that's also important. The other reason that it's important to not just accept a meeting blindly is maybe you're not the actual one that needs to be on the meeting, or maybe you need somebody else to join with you, right? Or maybe you have somebody that's responsible for a department that you work with that's missing from that invite, right? As a leader, it doesn't matter at what level, right? It's your job, right, to take the lead. It's part of leadership, right? So if I notice somebody's missing from the invite, I should probably forward that to them, right? But I would only know that if I opened it up. And then, again, like I said, it helps you just kind of be prepared for the meeting. One thing that I think I could do better with, and that's, again, going back to how do we end meetings on time and how do we start them on time? Let's be prepared, right? So, like coming into this meeting, I jotted down some notes. I saw it on my calendar. I took the notes, jotted it down. Then I went back and reread my notes so that way I was prepared. So we've talked about setting up our calendar going into the week. We've talked about making sure we're accepting and declining meetings accordingly that have overlap. But what we haven't talked about is what does that mean for planning, right? So we look at it and that's planning our week, but really I think it's important to plan for the actual meeting in itself. Does anyone have any tips for how they go about planning for meetings that are coming up?
So it depends. I mean, if I'm having a meeting, I'm trying to incorporate not just an agenda, but some of the summary information or background detail that might be needed. So I'll attach either a document or maybe some emails that indicate what has led up to this particular meeting. So I don't know that everybody takes time to review those, but I am trying to incorporate more, not just for the attendees, but for myself, because I know then I've thought through what are we going to discuss, where are we right now, do I have the documents at hand when the meeting starts? Because I love to be able to open up the meeting invite and everything I need is right there.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. It keeps it really well organized for you too, I'm sure. I'm just kind of thinking like how I might adapt that. Because I think right now, I think there's a lot of technology that kind of helps, right? Some of it is available, some of it is blocked by different organizations because of its use of AI, right? Like Copilot, things like that. But I have noticed like the new Outlook specifically is starting to tag. Have you guys seen that? Where it's like you go into the meeting invite and it'll actually tag like different conversations that have happened in the past from you and that person, or maybe that topic. That's helpful, but I think what Rita you're talking about is quite a bit more deliberate, right? And sometimes I think being deliberate is really the best way to prepare, right? So you could use the AI to help you. It certainly helps, but it still takes a little bit of your kind of deliberate approach and planning and preparedness to be organized with it, right? And make sure you have the right information. And then also you're talking about putting it and sharing it, so like it makes it available for others as well. Which, if anyone's ever worked with Rita, she will always be prepared. One thing I could always count on, and two, she'll always have some additional information for you to be prepared yourself, right? So, I mean, as an example, getting ready for this call, right? I don't know, 30 minutes before, Rita sends out a note with some articles she's found that she wanted to share with everyone. I mean, it's just fantastic. I think that approach is something I've always admired about you, Rita. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
The other thing too is I was thinking as you go back, one thing with meetings and kind of takeaways, right? So like let's look at like the opposite end of a meeting, right? So we talked about ending on time. So we talked about starting, we started about being prepared, we talked about getting the invite. Well, what about how do we end? What's next, right? So there's also, again, going back to I think the article you put out, Rita, talked about recapping at the end of the meeting. I mean, I get what they're saying. It's not the way I would do it, and that's fine. But the concept is really the same, right? Is when you conclude the meeting, there has to be some next steps, right? So how do you go about making sure everyone's clear on those next steps, and then what's like the follow-up that's going to occur, right? I'll give kind of like one of my tips that goes back to something we already said is when you have a pre-stated agenda and you follow the agenda, it really makes it easy for note taking, because you could take the agenda right out of the meeting invite and just take notes in there and then just assign owners, and it's really easy. But the basis of it is take notes, right? There's other things obviously that will help with those follow-ups, and then again ending on time with clear direction. What are some things that comes to your guys' mind?
So I do think there's some things in Teams that we could leverage so that action items or plans could be stored. Like I've done it in chats, but then you have to kind of circle back and look for the chats. Or if you are going to send out, kind of a follow-up, then you're kind of searching for your emails. And I think there are different ways in Teams, like they have and I haven't explored them fully, but they have a recap tab. And
yeah,
it might make, like I really have thought about it, but not taken the next step to really see how that works, see how I could, utilize it. But I think it would make life simpler, both for me and for people that were attending the meeting, to be able to go and find, okay, what do I need to, follow up on? Or even if you wanted to ping people to check on status, So I think there are tools even within the applications that we currently use that we're probably not leveraging enough.
Yeah, I think you just gave us our assignment for this month. I think everyone needs to go out and try to use the recap tab and then let me know how that works. I haven't leveraged it myself either, Rita. I think one thing that I've been doing is using the transcription a lot, right? So you can do record, and you could also just do transcription only, and then that helps to kind of then take it and then do a quick summary of the transcription to look back on. Especially if I haven't assigned a note taker. Maybe I have a meeting and I don't have anyone I really want to be taking notes, but and I can't do it myself because I'm really just trying to focus on the meeting. Then I use the transcription, right? So that certainly helps. But recap, I think that's awesome. Let's all try that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. What else do we have?
I just want to go back a little bit to like preparing for the meeting. Like,
yeah,
when the article states that you're likely going to save time if you've had prior discussion ahead of time before actually jumping into the meeting. And talking about tools now, I've been playing around a tool called Planner. It's on Teams as well. It's on the side. Mm-hmm. And it's basically a task manager you could put in, but also you can assign specific task and tag somebody with it so that they would know that there's something that needs to be covered or discussed. And I think integrating a couple of other tools that are already existing within the environment, like what Rita said, would help. Because the biggest challenge that I see here is that we could try all our best to change our own behavior, but everybody around us would just constantly do what they've been doing. And part of that is because of how we basically leverage the same practices that we've always done when it comes to meeting. But if you start incorporating tools where you tag them on stuff and things like that, they're likely going to see what you're trying to do, and therefore hopefully change the behavior as a team and as a group rather than individuals, because that's always a conflict point. You send an agenda, they don't read it. You send them the task at a time, they don't work on it until they've heard from you what exactly you wanted out of it. So those things I think are as critical that for behavior to change, we gotta use tools to make it easy, not just for you but for everybody, and see that, okay, well, this is actually much better. So it's the reward system, but also the routine, as indicated on that article, is that you gotta change your own routine as well, so that you can influence the behavior change.
I mean, it's what you're talking about is really that subtle accountability, and that's kind of what I was also getting to when I talk about joining like a meeting that's already underway, that you're a minute or two late. It starts to give you that subtle accountability to change your behavior, right, Marlon? And that assigning them tasks and things like that, I definitely think it'll help with that accountability subtly to have them pay attention a little bit more, be prepared more, because you're assigning them tasks. So I think that's a great suggestion. It also helps you get a little more organized. So I mean, it sounds like a great thing. I wrote that down too. I'm gonna check that out as a new tool. Again, looking for these things that create automation in the right form to help us, so that way we could focus on more kind of in-depth, critical, deliberate thinking is fantastic, right? It just helps our lives a little bit better. One thing, just to kind of pivot and dovetail though a little, is at the same time is, what about staying focused? Any tips you guys have? I mean, especially as we get overwhelmed, like it's so easy just to start multitasking, and then next thing you know, you're like, wait, what did they say, right? And I've had to take some steps myself to be a little bit more intentional in the meetings I'm attending. What kind of tips do you guys have for that?
From a while back, one of our discussion, I think it was Fatima who mentioned that if she's in a meeting, she set herself on do not disturb. That way, we tend to do it when we're working on tasks, but on meetings not so much. Mm-hmm. And so you get pinged all the time, and knowing that it's urgent and you've seen it, you're compelled to act, rather than if it's do not disturb and you're in a meeting and you only see it after. You still work on it as soon as you see it. It's that you don't see it immediately because you're already engage in another conversation. It's just removing that tendency to get
Yeah.
distracted, even if you don't want to.
Yeah, don't be afraid to use do not disturb, right? But then you have to honor it yourself, right? That's kind of the trick. What else?
Well, I think using cameras helps people stay engaged because, it's harder to multitask while you're an attendee.
Number one item on my list is turn your camera on if you want to stay engaged. So like you probably noticed, I've even said it on a few meetings in the past, recently. I'm turning my camera on so I'm focused. And it's kind of a joke, but I'm also like incredibly serious. I obviously our cameras are off here because the bandwidth it would take to record this with cameras is quite a bit more. But particularly in one-on-ones, I'm making sure, particularly, if it's something I'm trying to preset, like what's my role in this meeting, right? And identify what my role is in the meeting. If it's where I'm going to be the primary driver, like I better be 100% locked in and focused, and cameras certainly help. The other thing I have is your phone. So we talked about do not disturb with Teams. Your phone has the same feature. Turn it on. It will help. Like I promise you, the world will not end if you're on a call and it's a well thought out call. It shouldn't last for too long, right? It'll be okay, right? There are ways that you can put do not disturb on for everybody but a select few, right? You could go in and set it up on your phone, at least on mine, where it's like if you ring twice in succession that it'll ring through. So then you'd let people know that that's kind of what you've set up, especially your team that you're working directly with or your close family members, like, hey, if it's an emergency, here you go. But those are kind of the key things that I thought of, and I think the camera is the biggest thing that helps me stay on task for sure. The other thing too is kind of coming into a meeting. I think there's also the tendency that you're again still working on something, right? How do you make sure you're on time for the meeting when you transition to work on something? The biggest thing I could tell you too is, if sometimes I'm working on something I'm not on a meeting and I'm just working separately, maybe I'm doing, a spreadsheet, whatever, right? It's okay to join the meeting early. It's fine. Just join early and just sit there while you're working. It's okay. And then the meeting will start and you won't be late. That's probably the last, I guess, tidbit I have for a takeaway to help you just stay engaged and stay focused. Anything else as we wrap up?
Yeah, but those early joiners, I get to pop up and I'm like, wait, somebody's in that meeting.
Oh, you feel pressured. That's okay. You can join and we'll talk about the weather. We can get all the pleasantries out of the way so we can stick to the meat and potatoes when we get to the actual meeting itself.
True.
Awesome. Well, I think we've kind of covered a lot of things here. Just kind of going through. I think the overall consensus, though, is in meetings, it's prepare, right? Whether you're the attendee or the person organizing it, prepare by reading the agenda or creating the agenda, right? Stay focused in the meeting and stay diligent, right? Make sure you start on time and end on time. And with that, to make sure we end on time, thank you guys so much for joining today.
For content suggestions, please reach out to The Blueprint at teleperformance.com.